was the itinerant English fellow who had hiked across Australia or something like that.
Mr. Bard.
Mr. Bard. He didn't last very long, but he was quite out of the mold, and just absolutely fascinated by him.
Oh, he was a wonderful teacher. He was a wonderful teacher. And one of the things he did was have us all bring gunny sacks to class because we were making things with straw, and parents that had ranches were asked to fill the gunny sacks with hay, and then we made things out of those things. He was a fine teacher.
For some former students, memorable teachers were those from the lower school.
I would think that the early grades were the formative grades. I was blessed by some wonderful teachers, particularly a first grade teacher, Mrs. Dew, Mary Bonner Dew, who actually believed in me, and unlike my kindergarten teacher, did not call me up short for staring out the window, as I was known to do. And dear Mrs. Dew, I still have a very nice card that she sent my mother summarizing the first semester. She believed in me. She was a great shaping force. Staying still in the lower grades, third grade, Mrs. Cubberly, but she too believed in what might have been taken as a somewhat backward or quiet student. She believed in me as well.
Had a teacher, I think the fifth grade, Ann Williams, and then the sixth grade teacher was Miss Miller, and she'd come to every sporting event, follow us to Sugarland football, and just, you know, and I stayed friends with her till she died. She's just like another mom.
Others recall special teachers from the upper school years.
Elizabeth Payton taught Latin, and she spoke Latin to us at least 3 days a week. Her passion was golf, and we learned Latin numbers by doing golf scores in Latin numbers.
I enjoyed history with Ms. Donlin, who was absolutely superb, and she was also in charge of the yearbook, and I was the editor of the yearbook my senior year, and did both the editorial part and also the business part, got the ads.
And then Madame Suzanne Downs, who taught French, who was a World War II bride, came to the United States, was an absolutely wonderful French teacher, and inspired all of us to learn not only about French history, but a lot about the customs and the food and the fashion of the people there.
Some teachers inspired passion in a specific subject.
There was a gentleman who's no longer here named Mr. Border-Gray, who was here for a short period of time, and he was a really funny character and made history interesting.
I loved history, always loved history, still love history. I enjoyed Spanish and I enjoyed English. I love to write short stories.
Mr. Socek was our science teacher in middle school. He was just wonderful. Everybody loved and respected him, and he was just a marvelous teacher. I remember vividly when he had us in class and took a cigarette and blew the smoke through the cheesecloth, and the cheesecloth was yellow.
Spanish and English. Senora Rattery started me off. Este es mi cuaderno. And I lasted all the way through a graduate course in college in Spanish literature. Loved it all the way through, thanks probably to Senora Rattery.
Pat Foley was an art teacher who was remembered as a real character.
If you weren't good, which I wasn't, he would make fun of you, but in a very funny way, but would help you and welcomed you in his class, even though you weren't a good art student. And I ended up taking wax for bronze for him during interim term, and that was really interesting. He was quite a gifted artist. I know he did several statues for A&M, and he's done some of the ones around campus.
Hundreds of Kinkaid students owe an interest in history to Art Goddard.
He was a decorated villain, and every year he'd kind of do a reenactment of the war. And, I mean, he made you feel like you were on the battlefield right next to him. He's a great storyteller. I think it gave him much keener interest in reading about it, to see it presented the way he did. And he's really like that with everything, but I mean, particularly, talking about World War II, because he's right there in the thick of it.
A few Kinkaid teachers carried an intimidating reputation.
In 5th grade, we had a teacher that was very, very strict, Paige McCullough. And a brother of my first best friend in school told us that when we got to Mrs. McCullough's room, she was probably going to kill us. And of course we believed it. I went home and I told my mother, I said, "Mommy, I'm not going to school at Kinkaid in the 5th grade." But in the 5th grade, it turned out that she was probably one of my most favorite teachers.
When I got into high school, we had a little gal named Eva Hooks. Everybody scared to death of her. She and I were big buddies. And a history teacher named Miss Shrek that everybody's scared of. Some people thought they were mean. They weren't mean. But they could scare the dickens out of you, though. But I wasn't too scareable. Miss Shrek would quiet the class down. She used to throw erasers at you. But I always sat right in front of them, so I never got hit.
Ann Tharp Clifford and others made English a favorite course.
Miss Clifford was an English teacher who was fabulous, and her daughter graduated from Kinkaid.
She taught me how to write, and I don't think there's anything more important than that, learning how to write.
She had us write something every week. The subjects were varied. I remember she did her master's degree on thinking up topics for high school English papers. And so we had a variety to do, and writing has remained an interest of mine ever since, and I certainly credit Ms. Clifford for that.
I didn't really get any formal grammar and stuff in middle school as Kinkaid had done for their students. I think I had probably the least self-confidence in that area, and in the end, through my teachers, felt that I could write a good paper.
When I got to college, I realized just how much advanced I was over some of my fellow students.
Even non-students in the Kinkaid community learned lessons from Kinkaid teachers.
One or two I remember the most was Barbara Cooney, and she's going to retire this year. I learned a lot from her history class, and she still had that like thumb on you, on the students, and she still has it today. No monkey foolishness, and I admire and respect her for that.
One of the most memorable faculty members ever at Kinkaid was J. Barry Moss.
Mr. Moss, of course, that I know so many people talk about, was such a wonderful English teacher too, and encouraged everyone. And I, who was not an A student, but when another English teacher had told me, that I shouldn't even bother to take the AP English test, he said, "Why not? Take it." And I placed out of all my English. I was a nursing student, so I only had a year of English or something, and so I didn't have to take English, and he encouraged me to do that.
Mr. Mouse was, he taught religious subjects, so he was always trying to guide those kids in the right direction too, as to being honest, being kind, and what have you.
All Kinkaid students realize that they owe a large measure of gratitude to their teachers.
At Kinkaid, we learned to study. We learned how to study. So therefore, we were able to cope with the work at college level, I think, in a very excellent manner. Of course, we griped about extra homework, or what we thought was extra homework, and we were always having something to say, you know. But the reality was very, very clear when we got to the collegiate level.